Welcome back, everyone, to the Cannabis Heals Me podcast. This is your host, Rachel Kennerly, coming at you once again from the Storybook Inn Studios. So glad you guys are joining me today. As always, I'm very appreciative that you choose to spend this time with us. I know there's a lot of podcasts out there for you to choose from, so glad that you're making time to listen to our little show here on the World Wide Web. Just want to remind you guys of our Tell 3 People Challenge. I know a lot of you guys are really putting the word out there about the podcast and telling other people, and that's one of the reasons why we created this Tell 3 People Challenge. For those of you who are new to the podcast, the Tell 3 People Challenge requires you, well, it doesn't require you because we're not requiring you to do anything. We don't believe in that unless you're my son, and then I require you to do certain things like brush your teeth and take a shower, stuff like that. But since you're not my children, you're not required, but we ask you politely, reverently, with our hat in our hands, we ask you guys to share the podcast with 3 people each week. If you'll just pick out an episode or just, tell people, hey, all the episodes are great. You should totally listen to this show. And you'll be surprised the places that you can share about the podcast. I actually had the opportunity last week when I was at a homeschool practicum to share about the show and let people know about the podcast and about cannabis and how it's not constitutional for this plant to be banned, and how it's not constitutional for the government to tell us what we can and can't put in our bodies. So I think you'll be surprised the areas that you can work this into the conversation. Or maybe that's just me because I'm always trying to work it into the conversation. Because really this issue to me goes far beyond just cannabis. It's about personal liberty and whether or not we have autonomy in our own lives. So tell 3 people about the podcast. We would love to get more people listening to these stories, sharing these stories. The tide has turned with cannabis. About 65-70% of people in the United States want legalization, but there's still that stubborn 35%, a lot of whom are politicians and people in law enforcement, and we need to make sure we turn and change the minds of those stubborn 35%. So tell 3 people about the podcast and try to make one of those people be someone who still believes that prohibition is the best course of action. Share an episode with them that says, look, the government shouldn't be standing between people and their medicine. To me, that's the easiest way to appeal to people, to say, look, I've got this sick person who is in a life or death situation and they have to break the law in order to continue to live. And that's been the case with many of the guests that we've interviewed here on the show, is they have to choose between their life and the law, and they choose life over the law. And I think any of us put in that same position would do the exact same thing. If you would like to hear more about cannabis in person, we would love to have you join us for Cannabis Conversations on July 26th here in Lufkin, Texas. The address is 2801 Valley Avenue. Cannabis educator Amanda Hughes Munson is going to come down and spend a few hours with us on a Friday evening just talking about cannabis, about the plant, about the history, about the terpenes, about the cannabinoids, and how this works. And we would love to have you come out and join us. It's nice to meet other people who feel the same way as you about this plant and about liberty and bodily autonomy. So we'd love to have you come out and invite a friend or two, invite some people from church. So Friday, July 26th, go ahead and put that on your schedule at 2801 Valley Avenue. We're going to start around 6 and run to about 8:30, maybe a little later, depending on how long Q&A goes and how many people show up and actually want to get involved in the conversation. Because it is a conversation. It's not just going to be Amanda up there lecturing us. It's going to be a conversation. There'll be plenty of time for question and answers. On June 26th of 2018, Oklahoma approved their medical cannabis law. And in honor of that, and because I'm really jealous, but in honor of that, I wanted to invite one of the people that was very instrumental in getting 788 passed, and who's been a vocal, outspoken advocate for cannabis legalization for 30 years. I wanted to invite Norma Sapp on to kind of give us kind of an update on how things are going in the state. Their legislature just wrapped up their legislative session and kind of got their hands in the mix on cannabis. So I wanted to get an update from her on the status of medical cannabis in Oklahoma. So I invited Norma to come on. I am going to go ahead and warn you, the audio is a little funky because Norma was driving down the road talking to me on her phone because she's a super busy lady. So, and I am no audio expert, so I have no idea how to clean up the road noise. I'm using my software as best I know how, but I don't really know how to use the software. So I tried to clean it up, but her side of the audio is still kind of rough because of wind noise in the background. So I apologize for that, but I hope you guys will enjoy the conversation. And without further delay, here is Norma Sapp. Well, I just wanted to touch base. It's almost the 1 year anniversary of 788. So I just wanted to touch base to see how things are going in Oklahoma. I know the legislative session was kind of disappointing, so I just wanted to talk about that and then maybe talk about some strategies since you've been a cannabis advocate for quite some time, maybe some strategies that you've used successfully to change people's minds.
Well, the legislative session was really very, very good compared to previous years. We definitely have friends in the House. We probably need to get rid of like 3 senators, and then we'll be friendly on both sides.
Well, 3's not too bad.
And yeah, those happen to be the leaders, though, and so they make everybody kowtow to their desires, and they were just part of that reefer madness era, and they don't want to give up. But maybe with another year under their belt, and they'll see that, by now, surely they've been exposed to somebody that says, hey, it really works. And so, you never know. So we'll see how it goes next year. If not, we're going to jump on the bandwagon and help those individual towns elect someone else. And how is it after a year? Well, okay, so we didn't really get product until October, and I was just reading online. There's still a lot of people complaining, especially in smaller towns where they have no choice but to go to their 1 or 2 dispensaries. And there's, I guess, a lot of inexperienced growers that don't know how to ripen things. And so maybe they're just spoiled from what was coming in from California before, and they knew what it should be like, and now it's a little different. I don't know. I haven't been to very many dispensaries. What I've been in, the cannabis looks pretty good, but I didn't have to fire it up. I didn't buy any, so I don't know. I hear an awful lot of complaints that people are unhappy about the quality. So let's hope we progress a little bit before the next year is over.
Yeah, it's all just kind of a learning experience because it seems like most of the growers I've talked to, they don't have a lot of hands-on experience.
The cure is a big deal, growing it, just follow the instructions from the guy at the grocery store where you buy all your heads and dirt and bags and all that in your grow tent. Follow the instructions and you're bound to have a product. Now, curing is an art, but you can also find that information on Facebook pages or in a book. So like we were just discussing on this one thread, there's 1,500 licenses been sold. I'm not certain there's that many been opened, but there's 1,500 in the state of 4 million people, and about half of them probably won't succeed because they didn't make good business plans to survive for 5 years while they're struggling.
Yeah. Have you seen prices start to come down, or are they still pretty high at this point?
Prices in the stores for products, yes, they are about what street price is. And let's start bragging on it. Like I saw something yesterday about moon rocks in one, and it was $65 a gram. I'm like, whoa, it's not worth it to me to try that. But let's see, prices on doctors are definitely coming down. We started out with the very first doctor office that opened for recommendations was $350 for the doctor, and then
wow.
You still had either $20 if you're on Medicare or Medicaid, or $100 to the OMA for your card.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's everyday prices. A lot of places for $60, and several places like dispensaries are doing free recommendations. They're seeing it as an investment to get their patients taken care of. And then $45 is pretty common for a lot of dispensaries for when they're doing patient drives. And I've seen $35 and $30 for the veterans a lot. So that's really coming down.
Yeah, that's great. That's quite a drop. I guess just as more doctors have decided, okay, this isn't as terrible as we've always heard. And let's get a little piece of this pie too.
Oh yeah, the first ones in, they made it really good. I can tell you some stories about how much money, cash money, they were walking out of stores with at night.
How many medical licenses have been issued so far for through the state of Oklahoma?
Update 2 weeks ago was 138,000 cards.
And they weren't thinking they were going to see anywhere close to that for quite some time, right?
They didn't never expect it to get higher than 85. They compared it with another state, which was Arizona, because they had similar population, and they thought it would max out about 85,000.
Do you think because y'all's law is a little bit better than Arizona's, do you think that's why you've had more people sign up?
Yes, we are much easier. I think the Arizona tribulations come down to there's a list of qualifying conditions, isn't there?
Okay.
I think so. There's also a distance problem there. All people here, if you have a card, you can grow. Only if you're way outside of a distance of, I think it's 50 miles in Arizona, do you have the right to grow. Other than that, you have to travel into wherever the limited amount of dispensaries are.
Well, that makes a big difference because not all states have the home grow like Oklahoma does.
Yes, correct. I can't even remember if Missouri did or not. I don't think they did.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think they do.
Arkansas, I don't believe they have the right either, but I'm not certain on that one. But I know theirs took 3 years just to start to open their first dispensary.
Are they finally up and running? Because it took forever.
Yes, they are finally. I think they have 3 dispensaries in the whole state.
Wow. And there's more dispensaries in Oklahoma than there are like what McDonald's and Starbucks.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't compared that. That's interesting.
It seems like I saw that somewhere. I'll have to look that up again because I think I saw that stat somewhere that there's more, at least more licenses have been issued than there are McDonald's in the state of Oklahoma.
Yes, some of the dispensaries have not opened with their license for a couple of reasons. One is they came in and bought them in case we put a limit on them, and then we didn't put a limit on them. That could happen in the future, but who knows? And then there was also another reason. Well, they were going to try to make money on them if the limits came down. But also, a lot of them are having difficulty still in their small towns. They're having to jump through hoops. There's still small towns that think they can rule it however they want to rule it and charge whatever they want to charge, simply because they are a small town and they haven't read the newspaper, I guess, and seen what the state law is.
So as far as the recent legislative session, did that thing with the waste removal, did that get passed?
It did, but we have not seen a move on that. I think it was because the language got changed on the House side and then was finally approved on the Senate side, that took out the stalks, fan leaves, and the roots. So what's left, and even those
exactly
are compostable. And we've been seeing people make medicine out of the stalk. So, and the root is historically been used as a medicine. So, there's not a whole lot left. The other need that I saw was at processors. They probably have some residue left over that's not fit for, it's too contaminated or whatever to use as something that you could sell on the black market. And that's what the whole thing was sold for, was to keep product from being diverted to the black market.
Yeah, well, as long as they can make enough money on the legal market, why would they go to the black market?
Well, okay, so what they were quoting was that they happened to know in Colorado and in California, where they were both allowed to compost their stuff they threw out. For instance, if some grow got infested and they had to throw all the plants out, they were allowed to compost that. But they felt like they were diverting it to the black market, and writing down in their report that they had destroyed it.
Gotcha. Well, y'all's restrictions are a lot less restrictive than Colorado and California.
In some ways, yes, definitely. Of course, Colorado and California both have legalization now, but that's so screwed up a bunch of things. It ruined it for the patients there because now everybody is just a recreational user and has to pay the high taxes in California.
Yeah, they pretty well totally messed up their market by going rec and adding all those additional restrictions and licensing and all these hoops you got to jump through.
Yeah, I don't know what their petition was. Was it put on by the legislature? Was it put on by the people? Was it a constitutional amendment, or was it just 788 was a statute petition that allows the legislature to mess with it. That's why we had the arguments last year. And I don't know if California did it that way, and that's what happened. But as I saw what was going on, their legislature definitely was putting on some heavy regulations. And they're still having bus people in California. I guess up in the what they call the Golden Triangle, they have decided we own this. We are free people, and we are going to do what we want to do, regardless of what you say in regulations.
Yeah, I saw golly, I can't remember now because I have a 2-second memory, but I was just reading an article on that where they seized just tons of marijuana that was illegal, quote, illegal.
I just saw two for 350,000 pounds or plants or something.
Yeah, it was a bunch.
It was in L.A., though.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, so
that's unexpected.
It was probably operating dirty. Where are you at?
I'm in Texas.
Oh.
We've got nothing here.
Yeah. I saw them arguing in an article this morning about a list of conditions for CBD. I'm like,
yes.
What the? Do they
exactly.
Really think CBD is big, bad, and dangerous? What the hell?
It's absurd. And we had a great law that was written that Eddie Lucio had brought to the floor, and it was basically a lot like Oklahoma's law where it was between the doctor and the patient as to what the qualifying conditions were. There weren't any limits on THC, and they had to make so many concessions to the law to get it out of the House, and then that didn't even get brought to the floor in the Senate. And we couldn't even get, there's a pretty restrictive list of qualifying conditions, and the THC limit is 0.5%. And our veterans didn't even get included on the new bill. So they're still having to illegally heal themselves. Not that 0.5 per THC is probably going to help them all that much anyway.
Well, 0.5 is fine for most people, but this is the thing. How are they going to grow that?
Exactly.
There's another state that did that. I want to say it was Virginia, and they limited the amount of THC that the plant can grow. Well, depending on where you're growing it, that could vary. And if you're having to, have somebody come in and check for compliance, that could vary even during one day, depending on what time of day they took the test. And so how in the world is that going to work?
I don't know, but now we've got to wait for 2 more years because our legislature only meets every other year. We've got to wait 2 more freaking years to get something else passed.
That's the only time I'd say that's a disadvantage.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's just ignorance, and I think it's at this point willful ignorance because there's no excuse not to know more about this plant unless you just choose to not know or somebody's lining your pockets.
Well, I think it's this that they have no clue of where to look for those answers and don't really, like you say, want to find them.
Right.
But, yes, they're very ignorant. When anybody can say, oh, we've got to limit the THC.
Yeah, it was a very frustrating legislative session here in Texas because we had over 50 bills related to cannabis proposed, and I was just crossing my fingers and hoping that something was going to come of it, and then we got bupkis. We weren't even asking for decriminalization. We were asking for them to make the possession of 1 ounce or less of cannabis to be a non-arrestable Class C misdemeanor, and we couldn't even get that into the Senate for a hearing because of our Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick.
Wow. That's really rough. Because really, the reason that we had such a robust turnout was because we had 3 years of CBD under our belt before we voted on this. And once people started seeing the miracle, it was no stopping it, period.
We're seeing that here in Texas. More and more folks are kind of getting on board with CBD. And even though it was, until just recently, it was illegal to sell it in retail stores, people were doing it anyway. And so we're seeing more and more people using it.
I have a friend that makes it for dogs, and all of her best customers shipped into Texas because the veterinarians there were going to use it whether it's legal or not.
Yeah, my local vet said that several of his clients have used CBD with their dogs that were having epileptic seizures, and they tried all the expensive medications with no results whatsoever, and they started giving their dog CBD and the seizures stopped.
Yeah.
I wish I'd known that a few years ago, because I had a dog with seizures and we ended up having to put her to sleep because it just...
It's amazing for pets. Absolutely amazing. Even more productive than on humans. But what's so crazy there is in December, Trump made cannabis hemp legal. So that is a legal product. Yet your state legislature is still trying to limit it. That's just dumb.
Well, there were actually people being arrested in Tarrant County, which is up in the DFW area, for having CBD oil because of the state restrictions on it. So even though it was legal on the federal level, it still wasn't legal in Texas because of the way our laws were written here.
Right. Yeah. I saw one that got arrested at the airport.
Yeah, and then that lady that got arrested at Disney.
Yeah.
It's like, really? The happiest place on earth, you're going to arrest somebody for CBD oil? Hey, one of the other things I wanted to kind of talk to you briefly about is I read I think I've seen some stuff online about, just terrible jail conditions related to, and then the people that are getting arrested for, minor marijuana possession and getting thrown into jail and then, terrible things happening to them there. So I wanted to visit with you briefly about that, and I was wondering if maybe things are better now that we've had this new law, or things still just as terrible as it was.
As far as the jail goes, okay, so we're mostly talking about Oklahoma County Jail, and Oklahoma County Jail was brand new when I first moved here in '79, brand spanking new, and they did have design problems with that jail, but we had the same damn sheriff all this time until a couple of years ago when the DA said he was going to indict him over budgetary issues, something, I forget now why he wasn't eligible to be indicted even after he resigned. But the same deputy sheriff went right in behind him to become the sheriff, and so the same practices started happening. I spent 9 years going to the county commissioner's office every Monday for 9 years, back 25 years ago. They are just now doing something. They've had 4 studies since then, and all came up with the same conclusion. Yep, something's up, and we don't know how to fix it, and then they back off from it. Well, now, finally, an ex-lawmaker, Kevin Calby, who is now a city councilman, has gotten it together and done a real job of checking their books. And what they found out is the sheriff's department all this time has been siphoning off about half the money to buy jack boots. And I've always kidded about that line, but I'm not kidding. They bought jack boots and black uniforms, which was different than anybody else in the whole state. Every other county officer in this whole state uses green uniforms, or brown. They wanted fancy cars, fancy toys in their cars, and literal jack boots and helmets.
Well, that's so cliche, though.
Yeah.
They don't even see the irony of it.
And this is the weird part. I went to a meeting a couple of nights ago where Kevin Calby was speaking about the issues, and he told me about things that are just incredibly crazy. For instance, the the county or the what do you call them? The free attorneys. What are they called?
I want to say ad litem, but I know that's not right.
Well, anyway, the attorneys that you get
court-appointed
attorneys were locked up and were not let out of this one little holding cell. They have to go through a little holding cell before they can go see their the prisoner. And they 6 of them were locked up in this little holding cell for 6 hours. Simply
no way.
Yeah, like they forgot him. But they didn't forget him. It was retribution for how much they brought to light. As a matter of fact, a judge walked in there one day with city council members and the court-appointed attorneys and demanded to go see what was going on every floor at that point. And he had the right to. A judge had the right to. And the sheriff went bananas and said, "You will not." There was a big fight about it.
Oh, my goodness. And that guy still has his job?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I don't know why not. Well, that's what they're going to do. They're putting together a jail trust authority, and that jail trust authority can put a private company in charge of the jail and whatever they want to do, whatever they think is best. But the sheriff did not want them to know that they don't monitor those prisoners all day. They leave them locked up for 20 hours a day and let them out 1 or 2 hours and once a day, and they don't have enough staff to watch every floor like the jail is designed to be for. And they've got them running around delivering medications or their lunch or whatever, and or hanging out. According to some that I've talked to on Facebook that used to be employed there, they don't do anything. They just hang out with each other in the break room, and that's what's doing to these people, which causes, like Kevin Calvey said, a pregnant girl to be handcuffed to a rail and give birth because nobody's paying attention.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, the stories, I could go on and on and on for days. How many people have died there for their neglect and torture.
And some of those people are just in there for minor possession charges, I'm sure.
Well, and 87% of those people in there are not guilty. They're waiting to be turned guilty.
So they're just waiting for trial.
Yeah, one of the big things that didn't happen this year in the legislature was a bail bond bill that would have made it to where everybody, if it was a certain category, everybody would OR out. Well, the bail bond people went there in mass and said, "Hell, you're going to put us out of business." So they backed down.
So people that haven't even been convicted of a crime are spending months in jail because of bail bondsmen.
I know of a guy that was locked in there for 2 years because he didn't speak English.
Oh my gosh.
I know another guy that was kept in there and damn near killed twice. 87 years old, was accused of a crime by his young wife that he shouldn't have married so young. She wanted his fortune. So she accused him of diddling one of her kids. And for 7 years, he was tortured, put on meds that he shouldn't have been, taken off those meds, left to hallucinate, put in a nursing home, put in a hospital, brought back as soon as they got him back up to shape. It was horrible. He was finally adjudicated after 7 years. I followed that case 7 years.
Oh my goodness.
And he was let loose.
And then probably nothing happened to the woman that made these false accusations.
Right, but she had already sold everything that he owned.
Wow, that's terrible. Well, I'm going to have you back on just to talk about the criminal justice system, because I think that's an interesting topic, and people who've lived a good life all their life, they don't know how terrible it is, and probably don't have a lot of empathy towards people that are caught up in the snare.
They absolutely do not, because I belong to those pages. I watch them do it. They talk about how these people shouldn't have done what they did, but they don't understand the politics of it. Just like the bail bonds bill, that has been a good old boy system from the very beginning. A few people get rich, very rich, what they've been doing to people in Oklahoma. Even though the Constitution says otherwise, if you bail yourself out or if your grandmother bails you out, you are not eligible for a public paid attorney.
Really?
That's what they've told everybody for years.
So they expect you to just sit in jail until you've been charged with a crime or been...
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, well, they didn't expect that. But that's what happened. Many people, a large percentage of them, unless they were really lucky and had a good job and could afford to bail and an attorney, they just sat there because, and the same thing's happening in the prisons too, but that's a different reason. But they just sat there because they weren't going to be eligible for an attorney, and so they sat there for months on end waiting to get heard in their courtroom, and it started costing the state and the counties so much money. They started investigating and found out that these people were saying no to bail because of that reason. And then the same thing was happening in the prisons. People were going, no, I'll do the next 6 months so I don't have to be monitored once I get out. Well, that was causing backlogs too and costing us too much money in the prison.
Well, has any of that congestion kind of cleared up a little since the passage of 788?
It's starting to happen, but it has not happened yet because we're still filing them in there out of the county jail.
I know that there were some things that people in the 788 community were unhappy with that happened in this legislative session. And it seems like I heard that there was going to be another kind of push for recreational. Do you know anything about that, kind of what the status is?
I know that the language has not been written yet. We have identified the attorney and probably attorneys, but our goal is to file it in December. So that means it'll probably be ready for hit the street in February, which is the same time that the legislative session starts. So it will be a hammer. Every time they don't straighten something out that happened this year, then the people will know about it, and they'll run to the dispensaries or wherever to sign that petition.
Yeah. So that gives you some leverage when this next legislative session comes up.
Yep.
Perfect. That sounds great.
Yeah, Texas can't do that.
Man, I agree completely. We don't have that option, unfortunately. It's very frustrating. So now we just sit and wait. Well, I guess we don't sit and wait because we got a lot of work cut out for us over the next 2 years.
I saw a comment this morning from a Texan that said, yes, all these, and she named all these things that other states have around them and saying, and I thought we were for personal freedom in Texas.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. We, as a state, we pride ourselves on independence, but we're down there licking the boots of the federal government, going along with what they say when it comes to marijuana and prohibition.
Right.
You've been associated with activism for how many years now?
This November will be 30 years.
My gosh. What's been the biggest reason you think that opinions have shifted on this topic? Is it just because more people are trying it? And didn't die or become crazy, or is it because boomers are realizing there's health benefits, or kind of a combination of both?
Well, of course that too. The older ones that are 75 up are starting to die off, and of course us 60-somethingers, we knew from the truth, from the beginning, and so that has something to do with it. But I'll tell you what, honestly, the most important thing that happened was, our favorite house member is John Eccles. John Eccles is the floor leader. John took 2 years teaching everybody that is in the house about CBD because he knew the truth. Because his niece Katie had to go to their parents. His brother and sister-in-law took her to Colorado and got her help. She has Dravet syndrome. And so when he saw such a miracle happen with her, he knew he had to tell people about it. But like he said, it took 2 years to get a consensus. He knew he could run a bill then and he would have the vote. And once that happened, and it just took off in Oklahoma, the miracles were talked about in every circle. Old people, young people, veterinarians, every place where they knew. And we got very lucky too, because we had a company come here that used isolate, just to be on the safe side, rather than argue about that 1 point of THC.
Uh-huh.
He made an isolate that was THC free. And the first thing he did was go to law enforcement and say, "This is my product. This is how I manufacture it, and there's nothing to be afraid of." And of course, even the OBN, the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics, couldn't argue with it if it had no THC. So once that product hit the streets here and the miracles began happening, people were like, "Wow, this really is true." So it was just an easy transition to the rest of the cannabis plant.
Because Oklahoma's pretty conservative, like Texas. I guess we need somebody in the Texas House and Senate to really get active and start educating their fellow legislators.
Well, make sure you do outreach. Identify the members of the legislature that need to be knocked out. Find candidates to run in that area and put people on the ground in each of those districts. That's the way to show them.
I'm hoping in this 2-year period, because I've never really been active politically, but I don't want to say that I'm a single issue voter, because I think cannabis prohibition, drug prohibition period, I think it goes far beyond a single issue. It all goes back for me to liberty and our ability to live our lives the way we want to live it and put in our bodies what we want to put in it. So to me, this is a liberty issue.
Certainly is. Definitely. That's it. That's the bottom line.
So I'm hoping over the next 2 years to be a little more active in my local community talking about cannabis. In fact, we've got an event coming up in July. We've got a cannabis educator coming down from the DFW area just to have a cannabis conversation and talk about the history of the plant and what it does, and CBD and the different terpenes and cannabinoids and all that good stuff, just to open up lines of communication with people. So I'm hopeful that in the next 2 years, the legislative session will be a little bit more promising.
What you need to do is and we did this over a stretch of about 10 years through LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. You have at least 2 speakers in your state that are still there. We booked them into the Rotaries. The Rotaries are where the money is. The people that run and the people that have wealth. Go there and talk about this whole issue in front of them and couch it as a liberty issue.
That's a great idea. If you've got any other more tidbits or nuggets, I'm all ears, because I really want to shift opinions around this plant. And I live in a very conservative part of the state because I'm in kind of deep red East Texas. So any suggestions you've got for me, I'm all ears.
Okay. Well, I'll do it.
Sounds great, Norma. Thank you so much for your time today, and congratulations tomorrow for 1 year with medical marijuana being available in Oklahoma.
Thank you. Yes. We're really happy about it.
Man, I'm so jealous you don't even know.
You can move up here like the rest of the Texans are doing.
If someone in my family or I got some sort of medical condition, I'd be to Oklahoma in a heartbeat. But my husband is a Texas boy through and through, and it would take a stick of dynamite to get him out of Texas. So maybe a medical condition might do that, but I'm certainly not praying for that.
No.
Well, thanks a bunch, Norma. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye. Many thanks to Norma Sapp for coming on visiting with us today. And again, congratulations to Oklahoma. If you want to check out the show notes for today's episode, go out to www.cannabishealsme.com/48. Thanks again for listening, everyone. We will be back here on Monday with yet another healing story. Have a great weekend.